We like to think that we're mostly rational creatures, but when it comes to seeing car accidents and a lot of other things, the emotional parts of our brains end up picking up a lot of the slack from our rational selves. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. Brink, neuroscientist and Brink contributor Jonah Lehrer explains that even though we put a lot of faith in our rational brains, you just can't count out your gut instincts.
I spent time with some professional poker players, and one of the things that surprised me was how they use their emotional brain.
Hey, my name's Adam. Why do people always stop and stare at car accidents?
The reason we can't help but stare at car accidents is because our brain is tuned to attend to emotional events. So if something's really emotional, the part of our brain that lets us look away actually shuts down. So now we have to pay attention to that thing that's really scary.
To shed some insight on that, here's the author of Proust Was a Neuroscientist and the upcoming How We Decide. It's neuroscientist, Brink contributor, and all-round brainy guy, Jonah Lehrer.
So the brain actually has two ways of thinking. There's the rational brain, which is centered in the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain just behind your eyes. And this part of the brain thinks in very deliberate, rational ways. When you do arithmetic or think in logical structures, you're using your rational brain. But there's a whole nother way of thinking, which involves your emotional brain. It's sometimes called the reptilian brain or the limbic system. It involves structures like the amygdala and the insula and the nucleus accumbens. And this part of the brain deals with emotion. It's also generated by the unconscious, so the unconscious is like the supercomputer in your head. And what people have found is that the emotional brain is actually surprisingly wise. I think we tend to think of the emotional brain as being really irrational and full of these silly feelings that tell us to do the wrong thing. But scientists have found that the emotional brain is actually full of really surprising wisdom. I spent time in my book with some professional poker players, and one of the things that surprised me was how they use their emotional brain. What happens is when they get a really hard hand, set of cards, they don't know what to do. Should they go all in or should they fold? Should they make a big bet or should they not bet anything at all? That's when they trust their emotional brain. That's when they go, how does my hand feel? Is my hand sweaty? Is my palm nervous? What am I feeling? Is my pulse racing? And based on these emotions, that's how they act. And this actually makes a little bit of sense from the perspective of the brain. The rational brain, although we can control it and it can think in rational, deliberate ways, it's actually a really small little nub of brain. The emotional brain, in contrast, is the vast majority of your cortex. So that's why, it can take in lots of information and process it in a way your rational brain simply can't. So when you're faced with a really complex decision, when you don't know what to do, when you're playing a really hard poker hand, that's when you should listen to your emotional brain. That, I think, is one of the most surprising insights from modern neuroscience.
Plong. Plong.
And all quantum theories say that everything vibrates. Everything is made out of a wave. And because of that, these waves intertangle with each other. This is called entanglement. And entanglement means that our waves entangle with waves on the other side of the galaxy. Instantly, in fact. We are all connected via this invisible web. Einstein at first didn't like this picture, because if you were to move in one part of the universe, the other part of the universe will also respond to you faster than the speed of light. Einstein at first didn't like it, but it's been shown in the laboratory. This is the famous EPR experiment. It's been shown many times now that entanglement does in fact make possible vibrations traveling faster than the speed of light. But what it does mean is that we are all entangled. Our wave functions all entangled with other wave functions. Observation determines existence. But observation regards consciousness. Therefore, consciousness makes an observation, and then we say the cat is alive. Well, I determine the fact the cat is alive. Well, who determines me? Somebody has to look at me to determine that I'm alive and I'm not dead. Well, who determines him? Somebody has to look at him. And this is called Wigner's friend. Wigner was the winner of the Nobel Prize. He helped to build the atomic bomb. And this is called Wigner's friend. I have an infinite sequence of Wigner's friend. So who's the ultimate Wigner's friend? God. So starting with quantum theory, which is the most objective reductionist theory of all time, you go all the way up to God.